Welcome everybody. My name is Dennis Regas and I'll be presenting today with Shirley Roth. Myself and Shirley, Karen Akins, and Deanna Seha are the four members of the math team at the Riverside County Office of Education. Welcome and thank you all for joining us this afternoon. We're going to be sharing some ideas today from this first focus area on systemic structures that are necessary for progress from our roadmap. And throughout the presentation, we're going to be pausing at points and asking questions, reflective questions for you to think about and actually respond to in the chat. So as we're moving forward, there's contact information and we will make this presentation available to you at the end of our session. And as well, we'll have a question and answer time at the end. But if you do have some burning questions as we're going through things, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll do our best to address those. So when you do get this, Karen's already dropped a link to our roadmap for equitable and effective teaching in the chat, but this is also linked on the presentation when you get it. This is a larger document that has 5 focus areas, and we're going to be talking just about focus area 1 today. But to give you an idea, the purpose behind this roadmap that we as a team created this last year was to bring into focus some inequitable practices within education in Riverside County and to illuminate starting points for crucial conversations that can happen at the school site level, the PLC team level, and at the district level in order to provide a more equitable and effective mathematics experience for all of our students. So the organization of the document I mentioned, it's organized into 5 focus areas, and each section is designed around the idea of acknowledging where we're currently at, providing some options of actions that can be taken, and then how you might provide accountability and hold stakeholders accountable for those actions that your district comes up with. I will say that what we're talking about today and throughout the document is not an exhaustive list. It is meant to be ideas of where you could start, but your particular district or your particular school may find it necessary to start somewhere else. We just hope you start. So one of the documents the books that we built this around were the Catalyzing Change documents written by the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. They came out with some key recommendations for elementary and middle school math, and you can see those recommendations here. They're very similar in the sense of broadening the purpose of learning mathematics, creating equitable structures in mathematics, implementing equitable mathematics instruction, and developing a deep mathematical understanding in students. So the document goes into more detail of what these are, and if it's something that you feel is a good starting point for your school or district, your books are an excellent resource. All right, within the document, there's a call to action that we're asking all educators in Riverside County to take up. And basically, in a nutshell, it's recognizing that we're in some unprecedented times in our educational system. We're recognizing that we're still working within an education system that was designed over 100 years ago and is virtually unchanged. And when we think about this, we want to make sure we recognize that what we're talking about is the fact that there's a bell system and a structured day, and it was built around a factory model. Ideas like that are what we're talking about hasn't changed. Obviously, the cultures on campuses are undergoing a lot of change, especially recently, and we recognize that. But we also recognize that we also have a social responsibility to address the unjust and racist and harmful practices within our system that still exist. So we're asking each and every one of you to take up that this call to action and to help our students to see mathematics as the beautiful and joyful and wondrous subject it can be, while making sure that we help to dismantle those structures that continue to oppress certain populations. So tonight we're going to talk specifically about focus area 1, the purpose of focus area 1, we can see here, was to systematically analyze and dismantle mindsets and structures that hinder progress for all students, and thus act as the most significant barrier to a path of greater opportunity for all our students. So what we mean by this, in a sense, is that there are mindsets in our culture, in our schools, in our classrooms, and structures that oftentimes we don't think about, perhaps because we don't feel we have an avenue to change them. But those mindsets and structures create a very significant barrier for our students in their mathematics education. So we built this afternoon's presentation around those same areas of acknowledgement, action, and accountability. So when we think about our current reality, we want to recognize that specifically, and going a little bit deeper, much of our efforts are stymied by beliefs and mindsets around mathematics. And those are personal beliefs, they're societal beliefs about the existence of a math person, or that person's a math person. I can't count the number of times I've heard someone say, oh, that maybe they're saying, I've got to apologize to the math people in the room because I may get this wrong. I don't know about the rest of you, but that kind of thing makes me cringe. We have to recognize that this belief actually hinders our ability, and it actually underpins a lot of the decisions we make when we schedule students, when we create things like EL clusters or special ed clusters. And I know there's systemic reasons why we do that, from funding and other things, but we have to be conscious of how we're going to dismantle this idea that there is such a thing as a math person. We need to recognize that mathematics is really a social endeavor. So we also recognize that our school systems are very effective at sorting students into math and non-math groups throughout school. It starts all the way in elementary. It starts in elementary school all the way through high school, and that this is built on a faulty belief system. That and the belief that I'm talking about specifically is this belief that that to be good at math means you acquire math concepts quickly. And that if you're acquiring them quickly, then the best thing we can do is give you the next concept and speed your acquisition up. That is the underlying belief that we have to change. Okay, we sit and every document for decades has said that our curriculum is a mile wide and an inch deep. Our current document, our current standards documents still have too many standards per grade level. But the reality is that we say that we need to teach kids to a depth of understanding, but still our actions oftentimes reflect that what we truly believe is moving students through content and making sure that we're accelerating those kids that have shown a need to be accelerated. And those are the kinds of ideas that we need to challenge in ourselves and in our colleagues and in our system. We also want to recognize that there is systemic bias and racist structures that are in place that we rarely acknowledge for a lot of different reasons. But we must begin to openly confront these biases and these racist structures within our district. And so I'm going to pause here, and Shirley's going to step in.
Okay, so because this is a somewhat dense document to read through and process, we want to provide a little time for you to think about what Dennis just said, and also to maybe begin a conversation in the chat. So we think this is a really good strategic time to have you respond to this question. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to reply to the question in the chat after I read it, but hold your response until I ask you to share. And once you have shared, take a moment to scroll through what other people have said. Okay. So in relation to what Dennis has already spoken about, we'd like you to think about this question. Does your board have a policy that requires certain course completion prior to having access to advanced classes? If so, why? Think about it and respond in the chat, but I'm going to ask you to hold on to that answer for a moment. Why do you think that there's a system where we have prerequisite courses in order to get to advanced classwork? What's the underlying reasoning? And really, how successful is that? Okay, if you would finish your thought and then hit reply, and then be sure to scroll through some of the answers that other people are leaving in the chat. As I'm reading through some of these, I'm reminded of other things that were in place when I was still in the classroom, and we had tests that you had to take to make sure you were qualified to get into certain courses, and certain grades that you had to get in prerequisite courses. Even if you completed the course, you still had to get certain grades. Sometimes it was based on teacher recommendation.
The chat seems to have that common thing with lots of yeses. And please feel free to continue some of those responses on Twitter with us for our live chat too.
So one of the things that several people have mentioned in the chat is that they have them, and there's a lot of reasons why you may have them. And I think one of the important things that makes this work so challenging is the idea of a prerequisite class isn't in and of itself a bad thing. It just depends on how we've applied it, and it is something that at a systemic level at this point is probably worth another look, unless it's something that your district has looked at very recently. Because some of the things that may jump out is that there's certain math classes that are a prerequisite for pre-calc or calculus. But when Algebra 1 becomes a prerequisite for biology or chemistry, when any biology, algebra, or chemistry teacher would tell you that that is not a necessary prerequisite, that becomes a gatekeeper for students. And and a lot of the comments are talking about a high school, but I did see a comment from middle school, and oftentimes there is accelerated math classes in middle school, and the process for placing students in those classes ends up being simply a state test, whether or not they performed proficient on SBAC or met or exceeded or advanced. And maybe they needed to have done that for several years, but if that's our only measure, then you're inevitably going to be keeping kids away from those classes. And whether or not those classes should exist is a different topic altogether. But the reality is we need to look at those structures and what those criteria are, and who we're excluding with the criteria we have. And then I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the simple fact, especially in middle school, but as much in high school, is I hope we're asking the students if they want to be in those classes. Especially in middle school. I'll say it again for high school, but I hope we're taking into account and asking students, where do you want to go? What's giving them voice in what classes they have access to, even if their test scores don't warrant them being in there. So if we move on a little bit here and talk about the actions phase, and again, I want to reiterate the fact that this isn't a comprehensive list. There's suggestions of possible places to start conversations. And I want to state loud and clear too that there is no expectation that every single one of these actions be taken up by a district, a site, or a teacher, because that's not realistic. We talk an awful lot in the document about this. These are starting points of conversation for groups of stakeholders to begin the change process or continue and focus the change process that's already started at your school or your district. So one of the things that we address in the document and is addressed in Catalyzing Change is this idea of ability grouping in elementary school. It's really where tracking starts. And we do it with the best of intentions, but I think at the same time, we need to recognize that it's just another form of tracking. When we insist on ability grouping in elementary and middle schools, what we're really doing, maybe with good intentions, is telling some students that they're good at math, they're math people, and others that are not. And one of the things that that a lot of times in education we continue to ignore is this research that actually shows both struggling learners and advanced learners benefit most from heterogeneous groupings. This is one of the reasons why we really need to start moving away from advanced classes, accelerated classes in middle school. Our current framework, our new framework, and the standards, and many professionals have all recommended it. San Francisco Unified has has shown a lot of success with it over the last 5 years. But the reality is the performance on state assessments and in class in general increases for struggling students and advanced learners when they're put in heterogeneous classes of mixed ability and are allowed to thrive together. I think Shirley's muted, but she's reading the question.
That's it. That won't be the last time that happens. I'm just warning you right now. So just get ready to tell me to unmute again. The question is, who is ability grouping truly beneficial for? I think Dennis just said it isn't, but maybe it is in some respects, or we think it is. Okay. Does ability grouping work for or against deeper understanding? Put your comments in the chat, and I'll give you a few minutes before I ask you to reply. Okay, if you could reply in the chat and make sure that you get a chance to read other people's replies.
There's a couple I've seen. I love, it's beneficial for the adults because it's for the adult comfort.
Yes. Yeah, there are several comments about it being about adult comfort. And ability grouping, I think too, as shown in the chat, it comes in a lot of different forms. It ranges from, the way classes are built from an entire year potentially, that's the way kids are scheduled, all the way down to small group instruction that's on a small level for a short period of time, a day. Pulling kids from a formative assessment, there's things that could be seen as ability grouping that are beneficial when you give that formative assessment and you pull a small group of kids to help clarify some misconception that came about from the small group instruction. Someone could argue that that's ability grouping, but we're really talking about things that are slightly more permanent, that you've created even within your own class, several levels of students, and they're each getting different instruction or different practice because of their ability. Oftentimes the kids that are put into those low groups end up tracked basically and never getting access to the same mathematics that who we perceive to be the advanced students are getting. And so those are the types of things that are extremely detrimental to students. But they do work towards adult comfort because it's easier to plan for a group of kids that are all at the same level. It's easier to provide practice. It's difficult oftentimes to facilitate those whole class conversations and make sure that everybody is participating and learning and moving their understanding forward. So it's again one of those nuanced things that we need to make sure we aren't just doing what we've always done because that's what we've always done. All right, so the next topic that go ahead.
I would say, am I muted again? No, this time Dennis was going to mute me, but no. I wonder sometimes what ability it is that we're looking at, or what are we calling ability, right? That's ability to think, ability to reason, all our kids have. Memorize, maybe that's not such a valuable thing to group kids around. You know, what is the ability that we're looking at, and why do we want to target those kinds of ability? Aren't we looking for a lot of perspective? If it's thinking, we want everyone to be exposed to different thinking and to make decisions, to read things out for themselves. So I don't know. It's many of these questions down to what are we really talking about at the heart of it? What is it that, you know, these words, we all know what ability grouping is, but really what ability in the first place that we're talking at? What are we valuing?
I think too, no, absolutely. Thank you for that, because I think it goes back to that underlying belief that our system has, that in which being good at math means you acquire mathematical concepts quickly. And often those concepts, we need to be honest, are procedures. And
they're not
right, they're not concepts, they're just you're acquiring procedures quickly. And you're able to, you know, regurgitate them effectively. And so you move more quickly through the standards. When again, that's not depth of understanding. And I'm very passionate about this because we all recognize the problems that our world is facing, from, you know, climate change to the, you know, being just inundated with data, good, bad, and otherwise. And the problems that we have now and my son is going to be facing when he's my age, can't be solved if we keep teaching kids as if, to quote Joe Bowler, as if computers don't exist. We've got to start teaching math for depth and understanding. And stop focusing so much on whether or not they picked up a procedure that a computer can do way faster and way more accurate for them. And that leads us into this depth versus speed piece, where oftentimes, again, analyzing our practices in our schools, in our classrooms, and districts as to around coverage of content and pacing guides, because oftentimes these are the things that truly get in. They're the true roadblock for our teachers in classrooms, is whether or not they're on pace with that pacing guide and whether or not they've covered all the content that they're supposed to cover that year. But just simply the idea of coverage, like the fact that we use that word, it's not learning. We're not ensuring learning of certain standards. We're ensuring coverage, and we all use the term. Teachers ask all the time, like, if you're going to ask me to do this, how am I going to get through all the content? How am I going to cover all the content? Like we need to recognize the way we're talking about these things is giving us a window into what our system is truly believing. And so thinking about that, we have another question here to respond to.
So our question is, why do we continue to insist on coverage of standards? What are our underlying beliefs that we need to address? Are they supported by the research? Thank you for replying. Would you go ahead and hit reply? And I want you to know that I'm going back and looking at really, really good conversation here. And while you're replying and scrolling through, mindset has come up several times in these answers. And I think that's another lens to look through. Because whether it's the expectation of covering the standards or ability grouping or any of these other topics, our beliefs about learning are critical, right? I do know that it's not nice to not be picked for the advanced group. And it truly affects my mindset towards learning and mathematics if I'm not in the advanced group. It hurts my feelings and it destroys my beliefs about my own ability, just like this coverage. Karen, what are you seeing there?
I'm seeing a lot. I'm seeing again, it's something that we've done. It's something we do to teach to the test. I did like this. There's one, I'm trying to find it again, about uncovering the standards instead of covering the standards. Some really great comments.
Marcia said something that is, I mean, we've been saying for years, but it still holds true. We teach the way we were taught, unless we bothered to think about the way we're teaching, right? So much of this is, and Dennis mentioned it, that it's the way it's always been and we don't seem to question it. And we somehow think that it does work in some way when we have decades to prove that it doesn't. You know, we're not getting the results that we think we should from the things that we're doing, but we continue to do them anyway.
It's compliance. It's the pressure the teachers feel to teach. And this is stuff that's coming from the chat.
I think that I've heard a lot of teachers over the years too, that pressure comes from a feeling of like a desire to make sure that they've provided students with what they need for the next grade level. Like there's this feeling of like, I've let my students down if I don't get through anything, because what if they needed some of that for the next grade level? And it's a totally legitimate concern. It's a totally legitimate feeling. But it's really hard to fall back on the fact that research shows that as long as we focus on those like high yield content areas and those really important standards that have longevity through the grade levels, that covering less, students will do better on tests, they'll do better on state tests, and they'll be better prepared and more successful for future math classes. But it's a really hard mind shift for a lot of people and not something that's going to happen overnight. Yeah, and then I love one person just put in the chat, sometimes we tend to think that if we didn't teach it, that the kids didn't learn it. And something that Shirley here regularly reminds us is,
Yes.
Kids learn things outside of school. and sometimes
Yes,
they make connections. They make connections that we haven't made for them. So we need to keep that in mind as well. Okay, so the accountability side of this, actually, there's a few more actions we wanted to highlight as well. So addressing, issues related to instructional time. So this is, I put in here, it's a long-term consideration because this isn't something, this is an action at a district level that requires input from a lot of stakeholders. And it really comes out of a ton of research and several professionals that I've talked to, like Steve Limewand and many of the writers of Common Core, but just really any teacher who's been in the middle school classroom that has a 45-minute period and expected to cover something in depth, or a high school math class doing the same thing. We need to recognize that our lack of instructional time is actually a fairly significant barrier for us in getting content and providing academic success and social emotional health to our students. But again, this is a long-term, it is something that requires district personnel, teachers, unions, parents, and there's a lot of different ways to get to it, whether it's block scheduling or an extended day, but it's not something that can happen overnight. But it doesn't mean it's something we shouldn't be talking about. Also, tracking and acceleration in middle school and high school. And we mean, when we talk about this, obviously the research supports eliminating acceleration in middle school. But when we talk about tracking in high school, we're not just talking about the tracking of students into dead-end pathways in mathematics, but also the tracking of teachers that may take the form of, I've been here the longest, so I'm going to teach the highest level classes. That kind of tracking, where there's almost some kind of seniority that's required before you can teach the high kids, and things like that. Because we've got to recognize not only are heterogeneous groupings good for kids, but we need to realize that they're also good for adults. If I'm a high school teacher that teaches several different grade levels, algebra, geometry, and maybe, you know, a trig or math 3 or calculus class, I'm going to have the ability to collaborate with even more teachers to learn and continue my own professional growth and see the experiences of students in more than just one setting. And that's going to make me a better professional. So we're not just talking about the tracking of students. There is a lot of longitudinal data from San Francisco Unified School District who broke this down and eliminated accelerated classes in middle school, provided several branches in high school for students to accelerate when they were ready to accelerate. And they've seen a lot of success with it, but it takes a lot of work with parents and teachers. Oftentimes when I have conversations about removing accelerated classes in middle school, the first thing that comes up is that parents will be upset. We can't take that on. But the reality is parents might be upset because they don't understand it. It's our job as professionals to help them understand what's best for all students. And so this, again, is something that I'm very passionate about. But when people tell me that parents will be upset, it really sounds like people are saying, I don't really want to work that hard on that right now. And we can be better than that as a system. Again, like I said, creating multiple pathways. So here's another area for reflection.
Shirley, you're muted again.
And actually, that was so profound what I just said, and now you must forever. Parents tend to not be upset when they know that you genuinely have their child's well-being. in mind, that you care about their kids. And I think that comes in that discussion, right? And this is all about starting conversations. That's really what we're trying to get to with this document. And I wrote down some words before we started this, and this was for me. But the words were contemplate, ruminate, argue, meditate, debate, process deeply. We're going through this in 45 minutes, but I think these points that we brought up, it behooves us to spend some time internally first, and then with our colleagues and our family members, discussing these topics deeply, because we see the outgrowth of our beliefs, but we have to get to the root of what we actually believe about teaching and learning in order to make a difference. So that's the question. What are our underlying beliefs or biases that are maintaining our system? Because I got to tell you, I've lived through a lot of reforms, for better and for worse, but we always, it's like a rubber band. We snap back to what's always been. We keep going back to what's always been. And I believe that's because of our deep held beliefs. They just pull us back to where we are. So what are those beliefs or incorrect beliefs that are maintaining the system that we have? Drop your answer in the chat. Ooh, I think you're right. Hit reply whenever you're comfortable.
Like that one person shared that if we're going to talk about some people being good at math, we need to change what we think good is. Good at what being good at math is.
Well, which takes a lot of dismantling, doesn't it?
Yes.
Because as long as we have a system that creates a competition, for someone to be good, someone else has to be less good. Right? Why do we have to sort kids? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard to handle, but why do we have to? Because in order for people to win, other people have to lose. I don't think, I think the moment we have people that lose, we have a system that's set up to be inequitable. We're not giving opportunities to everybody. We're creating inequities. Okay, sorry. I better mute, and I don't think I have to unmute this time. I'm going to mute myself before I get myself in trouble, because I know Mike joined us, so I don't want Mike to hear me ranting. So I'm going to mute.
Well, I think you bring up a good point that sorting. I mean, that's been an underlying structure of our system for over 100 years. You know, it was built around a Tayloristic model of factory work, and it was built to determine a difference between management and factory workers. It was built to sort people, and it really hasn't changed that much. So, all right. So let's look at the accountability side of this. So our responsibility, it really is a responsibility to society that we start having these conversations, and that we start having the conversations with the stakeholders initially that want to have them with us, but everybody needs to be involved. So we really need to challenge the status quo. And this has come up some in the chat. And it's in the fact that a lot of these things are things we've always done. A few weeks ago, we had the opportunity of interviewing Joe Bowler, the math team did, and one of the things, I think I've probably exhausted the math team with hearing this quote, but that I love that she said in just a random comment was that we need to stop teaching math as if computers don't exist, because that's what we're doing. Like, most of what my son in third grade, a lot of the procedures and things he's being asked to memorize, he already knows that he can ask Alexa, or he can ask Siri. And it applies from kindergarten all the way up. And I do want to state that I'm not saying kids shouldn't have some flexibility and automaticity with basic facts, because that only makes higher level math easier. But if they've memorized those basic facts without understanding, then we've done them a disservice. And that disservice is going to have a huge impact on their future math education. And so we really want to work with stakeholder groups. That's what this document is about. And we can't keep doing things that we've always done. So we have to recognize that what we've been doing for a long time is not working in mathematics education. And it's systemic change that takes a long time to move. But we've got to ask ourselves, and someone, I think, I don't remember who it was, wrote in the chat that, we've got to make policies built around our beliefs, not policies that are built or that are created because someone else in maybe a different district or different school created it. We need to look at those things that are going to be policies for our district have to align with our beliefs. Okay, and if we need to ask ourselves if this is something we've been doing for a long time, or something that just we know a bunch of other districts are doing, stop and ask if it's working. One great example of this is things like diagnostic tests, like the many companies out there that provide them. We all had an ask from SB 98 this year that we ascertain the levels of academic levels of students in math and language arts. And this was a boon because every district that didn't have a diagnostic went out and bought one. But I'm still looking for a district that's using these diagnostics in a way that has shown tremendous growth in mathematics for their students, even measured by just SBAC, if that's going to be our measure. But we put these things into place that maybe they're doing at X district or they're doing at this Y district, oftentimes without asking if it's working. And that needs to change.
I said I would mute, but I just have to say, I think most of the time I can tell you what the results of the diagnostic are going to be before you give it. And I think most teachers can too, of the diagnostics that are.
Yeah. So kind of wrap this up. I think we'll ask this last question, and then we'll take some Q&A and some final thoughts.
And no commentary this time. I'm just going to say, what practices, policies, expenditures are currently in place because we have always done them or because other districts do them? And just reply whenever you finish your thought.
I love that response. So many. How much time do we have to create a list?
All the time you want, Don.
I will say that as you're typing a few things in there, someone wrote that diagnostics do damage as well. And I can speak to that firsthand with my son in third grade. And I think the diagnostic he had to take for language arts and math took a combined 5.5 hours of instructional time away from him to complete. And I don't care what information they're getting from the test at that point. That's just insane. And it was in half-hour increments. It wasn't, I don't want anybody to think my son sat in front of a computer for 5.5 hours at one time, but still.
Now, let's just combine something like the diagnostic with the test. What would you do?
I love that response. So many. How much time do we have to create a list?
All the time you want, Don. I will say that as you're typing a few things in there, someone wrote that diagnostics do damage as well. And I think the diagnostic he had to take for language arts and math took a combined 5.5 hours away from him to complete. And it was in half-hour increments. It wasn't, I don't want anybody to think my son sat in front of a computer for 5.5 hours at one time, but still.
Now
diagnostic with some other practices, like, I won't call it tracking, but by grouping or whatever, now you're doubling down on the damage you're doing, right? I mean, these practices build on each other and reinforce each other. And the result is that we really do hurt kids.
And homework was another one that was mentioned in there, and seconded and thirded, you know. So as we come to the end, one of the things that we wanted to share as a team from RCOE is this is hard work. And Shirley mentioned it, the document that we provided is dense. It's meant to be. It's meant to be thought-provoking, and it's meant to start or continue or focus the conversations that are already going on in the district. So I have to reiterate, like, we can sit here for an hour and talk about all these things, and I don't want anybody, it can seem almost hopeless, and I hope it doesn't. But there's a lot of things that need to change within our system to improve math instruction. And at the same time, we have to recognize we have to do two things. We have to not try to change them all at one time, but we have to start working on something. And that something has to be determined by a group of stakeholders that are engaged and involved in the process. And then instead, and as a personal passion of mine, and I think most people in this room, because I recognize a lot of names, that stakeholder group has to include students, even if it's an elementary school. Those kids may not be as eloquent and articulate and use the language we would use as just adults in the room, but they've got things to say. And they've got ideas that we should be listening to. So
and they will be running the show in a short time, right? They'll be in charge. So we better listen.
So the document, Karen shared the document again in the chat. You can also find it on our webpage, and when we send out this presentation, it will be, it's linked in here a couple times as well. We wanted to open it up for a few minutes. We've got about a little over 10 minutes left to just say thank you, but also what other questions do you have? You can drop them in the chat. Deanna's reminding us that you can hop onto @RX_math on Twitter to continue the learning and continue the conversation from tonight. Feels like tonight, but I realize it's just the afternoon. So what questions can we answer or continue the conversation? You can unmute yourself or drop it in the chat, either way.
Unmute now. And while people are doing that, I would just say that probably the things that you disagreed with that we said today are probably you should disagree with some things we said, I think, because that way you're really thinking about something. So if we made you a little bit angry today, or you disagree with it, or we don't think we understand or something, good. That's where we can have a conversation. And that's where we can start thinking deeply about our beliefs and our practice. So, and I'll just say it, Dennis is not always right. So sometimes you have to question. You're not always right. We have to question you about things sometimes. So there we go.
Dennis, I'll ask a question and you brought up at the end, was the idea that we know the iReady type assessments struggle to be actually good assessments. So what is the alternative for people that are looking for some kind of standardization, in the sense that they want to make sure every child, first of all, is learning, number one, I guess, and also that they know that grade level is preparing their child for the next grade level. That, I think grade level teachers want to know that. A second grade teacher wants to know they're ready for third grade. So what's a good assessment from your perspective that can help teachers start understanding that if they can do this well, then they're probably ready for the next grade level?
Well, I would say in my perfect world, there'd be a lot more use of formative assessment inside the classroom and by teacher teams. There are some great resources out there for formative assessment, like the Silicon Valley Math Initiative. You guys may be familiar with that. You might be familiar with Mars tasks. They're one and the same. But teams can also create short formative assessments to determine where students are at. Those could take the form of common assessments that teams give. It could, but what we do know from research is that formative assessment gets more effective the more frequent it happens. So the closer you can get it down to the classroom during the lesson, you know, I've asked this question and these are the responses, so I'm pivoting my instruction to respond to that. That's the in the moment formative assessment. I will be completely frank, having come from a position as a director of curriculum instruction, those kinds of assessments don't satisfy district personnel often, but they should. Because that's where learning really takes place.
And it's on the SVMI that you mentioned. Is that something that could be used across the system to start telling the system and the teachers that kids are? I mean, I'm guessing the Mars tasks because they're who they're written by, and then also SVMI who they're written by. That if kids are being successful on those assessments, that child is probably ready for the next grade level because of the type of thinking that needs to be done on those assessments.
Yes, they could not easily, I can't say that, but I mean, they can be implemented at a district-wide or site-wide level, and actually will give a lot of data that is helpful to, a ton of data that's very helpful for the teacher to know what to do next and whether or not they're preparing them for the next grade level. But also from a site administrator or district personnel lens, there is still data there to see if students are progressing effectively.
Dennis, you do have a good chat question.
There are several really good questions in there. And just to preface, Dennis, while you're reading those questions that we can have a conversation around, and they are where do we begin kind of questions. I think when we go back, whenever that is, I know that right now it's not the same as it was, and I don't think it'll ever be the same as it was. So we have a really great opportunity to change what teaching and learning looks like in the classroom. We've almost had like a reset. I mean, if there is a glass half full look at COVID, I don't know there's much of one, but it certainly turned education on its head right now. So it might be the opportune time to try to reset after we've reloaded a higher version of whatever we were doing, make our changes as we go back into those classrooms.
Shirley, I want to just add to that along those lines and it was mentioned about Joe Bohr being one of the writers for the new framework. We also will have that new framework to help with some of those conversations. And we have released a series of videos with Joe from that interview, and she talks a little bit about that. And one of the things she talks about is the fact that the framework will be available for public review starting next month for 60 days. So please take the opportunity to look at the framework and offer feedback on that document when it's open for public review.
There was a question in the chat about as a classroom teacher in your own classroom, like how do you start to facilitate these needed changes? What should you do with all the knowledge and mention inequities in the classrooms. And I invite anybody to chime in because, as Shirley said, I'm not always right, nor the authority on any of this. But I think it comes down to starting with ourselves and making sure that we challenge our own common practices, our own practices in our classroom, and make sure that we're at least giving thought to the things we're doing because we've always done them, you know. And I'm thinking of things like, you know, do we give a quiz every Friday? Is there homework absolutely every night? You know, what kinds of things are we doing in our classrooms to challenge those inequities? And although it doesn't oftentimes seem like it, like I think homework's a good place to start sometimes if you've never reflected on our own homework practices. Because if we think about it from a student's lens and think about maybe the good, bad, and ugly that our students are going home to at night, what's the inherent inequity in asking them all to do the same thing and having a rigid expectation around that? I mean, and this is just one example of things that we can reflect on in our own practice. But then moving outside of our room and finding a kindred spirit at the school site, or reading through this document and trying to put it in front of your administrators at your school and say, hey, I read something, this was really interesting, you know, can you take a look at it? I'd like to know how I can help to continue to improve math instruction at our school site. You know, and I recognize that might be, you know, uncomfortable for people to take on those types of leadership roles, but I truly believe that we have to step out of our comfort zone and challenge the system if we want to see a change.
Dennis, it looks like Don has his hand up. Maybe he has a question.
Go for it, Don.
Hey, thanks. I just had a couple thoughts. I too am someone who's been waiting for the framework to come out. However, I'm also weary of the fact that I don't know that the document itself isn't going to create change in the same way that sending people to a PLC conference is going to create change either. The knowledge itself or the value of having good stuff there isn't necessary and sufficient. The work has to be accomplished through, you have to have people at all layers of your organization who have not just the belief and the passion, but they also have the position required to help initiate and then sustain some of these changes. And it's got to be quantifiable and descriptive so that people understand what it is we're trying to do. I think a story, an anecdote I'll leave with you. Several years ago, we had a district come to our district to observe some of our integrated classrooms. They were going from a traditional arrangement to an integrated arrangement for Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and geometry. And this principal, she stopped me after about the 5th classroom I took her through, and she goes, "What did you do?" And I had no idea what she was talking about. And we went outside and she said, "I don't get it. Every single classroom I've been in, everybody's been in groups." And I just shrugged my shoulders. Yeah, that's just how that's how we do business at this particular site. And she goes, "Well, how did you do that?" And it just got me thinking about how we often try to create change from a top-down approach. And that's not sufficient to change the culture, which is what we've talked about so much, is the beliefs. Because you can take a principal can mandate, all right, look, I want everyone teaching in groups. And that means when I come into your classroom, I want to see tables of 4 together. Well, that you can put the tables together, but the teacher might just continue to do their normal day-to-day operations the way they've always done it. So then you send them to a training that then you equip them with some capabilities. But the reality is, at the end of the day, when you kind of get, just to kind of accelerate this point, if a teacher genuinely doesn't believe that learning takes place in a collaborative manner, if they don't believe that, then they're not going to their behaviors aren't going to flow from that. If they believe that learning best takes place by them disseminating and telling you what you need to know, then there's going to be behaviors consistent with that. And so in our system, we have people that have been conditioned to believe certain things, that excellence is one way and excellence, and then other people are like, nah, man, you're crazy. Excellence is this over here. So how do we how do we come together to have a conversation around beliefs and identity as an organization? Because your actions and the environment and our capabilities, that all will flow from what we believe. So the big question is, how do we do that in a meaningful way that survives the amount of turnover that occurs at the district level and at site levels? How do we do that? I think that's the big question.
Don, can I just jump in before you get your real answer here? So this will be the not real answer, but for me personally, and this is how it works with me, that's why I had to write all those things down. I wanted to bring them up, but honestly, I'm writing this to myself because until, and this, I say until, but I think it has to be ongoing. I have to reflect on these big questions, and usually the ones that don't rub me the right way, because I want to know why doesn't it rub me the right way? Because it's getting at, what are my deep beliefs? What are my deep beliefs? And because I will surprise myself, believe it or not, sometimes realizing that, you know what? I'm not right about that. I'm not right about that. I'm holding on to the belief that this, that, and the other. And it's because it's part of my culture and it's the way I've been brought up. I have to challenge those personally first before it goes to a group, before it goes to a system, before it goes to I have to be responsible for my beliefs. And I hope everybody begins with that. And I have to be ready to be challenged by my close friends and by other people. And when they challenge me, that's good, because you know what? I have to either defend or I have to go, you know what? I think you're right about that. Maybe I better change something I'm thinking about. It always starts with me first. Okay, now here's the real answer. Dennis or Karen or Diana, jump right in.
Well, I was going to say that I think that the way you would need to go about it, or one way to go about it, and it kind of, the answer kind of changes whether you're talking about at the district level, a site level, or maybe the teacher team level. But whatever level you're at, I think we need to ask ourselves, what are the things we have to do, like that we don't have control over? So if we're at a district level, that may be state testing, LPAC testing, that type of thing. There's certain things that we have to do. If you're at a teacher team level, it might be the district mandated benchmark, or maybe the unit assessments are mandated, those types of things. We need to identify those things and recognize we're spinning our wheels if we talk about that. Because you don't within your sphere, you don't have it as a district official. I don't have the ability to not administer SBAC. And as a teacher, if the district has mandated benchmarks, I don't have the ability to not administer those. But when we think about once you know those things, you really truly have to get stakeholders together and start a conversation with a goal in mind, identifying a topic, and recognizing that compromise is going to be necessary. That as a team of teachers, you'll make it better and will continue to improve. But it may not be, if it's me that initiates it, I'm going to have an idea of what I want, like of where I believe instruction should go, what it should look like. But if I've got to convince a team of 4 teachers that, and a couple of them really believe in direct instruction and kids in straight rows and that kind of thing, we need to recognize that a compromise is going to have to be necessary, and that it doesn't have to all look the same. But you need to find those systems that are actually creating barriers for students, because more often than not, they truly create massive barriers for our students of color and socioeconomically disadvantaged students and special ed students. So I'm not sure I totally answered your question, but I think what I mean to go back to is like Kelly's saying in the chat, how do we help people in the trenches see the need and for these necessary changes? it comes down to, like you were saying, Don, it's a belief. And to change beliefs, it really becomes personal, which is why it can't be top down. And it can't be me telling you group work's better than individual seat work. Because if you don't believe it is, then I've got to figure out a way through conversation to find the reason why you'll believe me. And we just don't. That's why the change is so hard, is we don't know what that is until we start to have the conversation.
Well, I would even add to that part of what makes this so hard is, because I've seen this played out in my own context repeatedly over and over and over again, and I've had principals that have come to me and said, "We're trying to turn the corner, but we have people that they have excelled under a particular system for so long," and that's, you can imagine if you were told that excellence was defined a certain way, and you've spent your entire career operating with that, and then all of a sudden someone's coming along and proposing, well, maybe that's really not the best thing after all, and maybe this over here is really what's best for kids. There's some definitely unique challenges there. These conversations, A, they're messy, B, they take time. And who's got the kind of time to engage in these conversations when most people are, especially right now during the pandemic, are in survival mode? And so I think that's why it's going to take some courage, and it's going to take leaders who are willing to ensure that these conversations take place, because ultimately what it comes down to is it's an integrity question. If we believe as leaders that what's best for kids is having consensus around this issue so that we can create policies that support the teaching and learning of all of our students to ensure that all of our students can be successful, then if we fall short of that, then that's on us. It's our own failure as leaders to try to make that happen. And so there's this kind of work is not something that typically happens. We don't really, in the elementary and high school level, we don't really create space to have those kinds of dialogues that are almost adversarial at times around competing belief systems. And yet, if we really believe that what matters is what, or if we really want to do what's best for kids, we need to courageously enter into those kinds of conversations. And it takes skill, and it takes courage as well.
One of the reasons I'm sorry, Dennis.
No, go ahead.
One of the reasons I asked the question I did is because sometimes it's not even about conversations; it's about personal experiences and seeing it in action. And I've found that when I've been working with other teachers, that until they actually experienced the idea of the kids really didn't get it the way I taught it, and I taught it like I've always taught it, or that kind of thing, then they didn't see a need to change, and their argument would stay the same. It just, because sometimes the conversation doesn't cut it because they can't see it in front of their eyes. They're going to defend what they always have done because they think that they believe that it's working, and they have nothing to show them other than somebody telling them it's not working.
Right.
So that kind of that cognitive dissonance type of a thing. And so that's even harder, because how do you get things going and the teacher themselves experiencing it through something that they've planned and they've dealt with, and that's a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of, and conversations would be a whole lot easier sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Kelly, I think when you said experience it for themselves, that is a big, it's a relatively small thing, but it's huge. At the same time, it's huge, because that's really, learning really is about experience, whether that experience is internal or whether it's what's going on out here. It's not about memorizing a bunch of stuff. It's experiencing it. And when you experience it, then you will believe it. And Don was talking about the beliefs. That's what all of this is about. It's about what we really believe. And teaching is not just a formula, right? Teaching is a moral endeavor. So it does come down to our beliefs. And I want to just insert something that's, to me, is so optimistic. Up until a few minutes ago, we were maybe 10 minutes over time, and we had nearly everyone still here on the call. And some of the people that left said they had another meeting, they had to go, and they were sorry to go. They messaged me privately. To me, that's a real vote of optimism. I mean, I am so proud of everybody that joined in here to talk about these things deeply. And I think this is where it really starts, these conversations. Supporting each other in these conversations.
Absolutely. There's one last thing I'd like to share, and something that Dawn and Kelly and you, Shirley, were talking about, triggered it, is I remember when you talk about, Dawn, you had talked about, like, how do we sustain this? There's so much turnover. And I think that's why we really have to get so many different stakeholders involved, from parents to district, site, teacher level, support staff, because when we're able to get all those people together and we coalesce around an idea of something we want to change, then if leaders leave, the group the group will maintain those beliefs. And, you know, as long as there isn't like massive turnover, you know, new school opens and half your staff leaves or something like that. You know, those types of things. But it reminds me, very briefly, as an anecdote, I think it was my 5th year teaching. I was working out in Orange, and in 5 years we had 6 principals at the school I was at. And the newest principal brought us in after about 2 months to a staff meeting and asked us to generate a list of our beliefs, what our core beliefs around, you know, teaching in this middle school were. And then he challenged us, and I remember at the time being kind of upset about it, but now I recognize kind of the genius in it, is he then challenged us because he put up the list of questions and comments that had been brought to his attention in the 2 months since he got there. And he said, well, these were the beliefs you guys are all saying you have, but these were the things you were really concerned about maintaining, and they don't match up. And it was kind of like, I look back on it now and I know I was upset. Like, I think everybody was upset at the candor and the honesty and, like, kind of calling us on the carpet. But it reminded me that if you really want to know what the values are of a school, is let's take a look at what systems, what structures maintain and that you fight for when leadership changes. Because that's really going to be the underlying belief system of that community, that school. So anyway, it was it just made me think about that. So with that, if there are more comments, we can keep going, but I think we've reached well past our time, and we greatly appreciate the conversation. Please reach out to us if you have more questions, comments. We are happy to help with this work in schools or districts in any way that we can. Join us on Twitter.
Remember, yeah, that's it. Continue on Twitter.
Yes.
We'll keep tweeting.
And thank you all for being here. And we'll see you in about a month for Focus Area 2.
Really good seeing you, my friends.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you guys. Great conversation.